The theme for this little joint discussion, like when Maggie talked about those two books that had common themes, Starless Sea and Piranesi. This theme is meditations on love and time.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the new Persuasion and X. I have a little elevator pitch for each movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Persuasion is a Jane Austen story, and these are my little... I thought Maggie would enjoy these.
Oh, boy.
Woman rejects perfect guy, stews for a decade, and tries to get him back.
Yeah.
Okay? And X is a horror movie following a crew shooting a porn in a cheap Airbnb at a Texas farm, and the hosts get real upset.
Yes. So two incredibly different movies, but
Right.
we finished watching Persuasion, and Cam was like, it was the same movie as X. And I said, what?
So the first thing that these two films have in common is that they are both indebted to very specific subgenres that are full of expectations, tropes, and which are very reverential of the classics within that subgenre.
Yeah.
So each of these films has a little subgenre that they're playing with, and they each throw in a little pivot, a little monkey wrench to add something new to that canon. So to start with X is a love letter to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
More so and differently than any of the official sequels to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Or remakes.
Because, yeah, we've seen a lot of those. And, oof.
They're fine.
I think the problem with a lot of sequels is that they don't try to recapture the spirit of the original. They rest on the laurels of the franchise, and they rely on Easter eggs, direct references. Oh, the title of the original movie, that was on the license plate of the car. But the plot was exactly the same, and nothing happened.
Yeah. Woo.
This film X feels like a genuine spiritual embodiment of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where it feels alive and fresh while it feels reverential.
Yeah.
And it never feels derivative. It's all these things that should be...
And it also feels distinctly modern.
Exactly.
Like, both of these movies are like that. Like, obviously, neither of them take place in 2022. Obviously, Jane Austen's 19th century and X is in the 70s. But it's appealing to modern sensibilities.
Right. And all of these accolades that I just kind of throw out there, all those adjectives, they should be contradictions. How can you be not derivative while being reverential?
Right.
But it's a hard thing for horror movies to do without feeling kind of slavish to the classics in the canon. And this one manages to feel wholly fresh and original while, and now here's a little list of the similarities, same time period, same state, same visual aesthetic. Everything is a burnt out, rusted, grimy. There is a sun-drenched finale in the same way TCM has. The diverse young cast is full of optimism and naivete. There is a steadfast refusal on part of the director to show any of the gore or violence.
That's true.
That is suggested.
It's pretty minimal, yeah.
And it has that magic trick effect where after you've seen the movie, you remember a lot of violence and gore. But in the moment, there's none of it. It's all suggestion. It all cuts away. You see the reaction to what's happening.
Yeah.
Or it's too in the dark for you to really see anything but maybe a muzzle flash.
Right.
It's very subtle. You also get this reveal in the climax that the villain doesn't have some big logical James Bond plan. It's insanity. And there's a deranged family connection, just like there was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You also have a chase through the woods. You have abandoned buildings and barns. You have this strange preoccupation with dead animals and meat and death of animals in nature throughout.
Yeah.
And the pivot, I think, of this film is, instead of doing the now obvious slasher thing of the slowly winnowing away the cast members until you have a final girl. It's like, and then there were none, as you have this death march towards Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
Instead, we narrow it down to 3 final girls, and then the movie goes from there. To sort of stop you from keeping score. It kind of controls that variable and then tells its own story. I thought that was really savvy.
Yeah.
And the other pivot that X adds to this genre and really heightens or foregrounds something that wasn't at the center of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the focus on the religious hold over the Deep South in the 70s and the cultural backlash to the sexual revolution. And that is what the film is about with this backdrop and riff on the classic. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Persuasion, on the other hand, lives in the shadow of the previous beloved Jane Austen adaptations. And the inevitable comparisons,
Yes.
which I am about to do. So, 2005 Pride and Prejudice with
the greatest film of all time.
Keira Knightley
I will never
and
let that down.
Matthew McFadyen. The burning sexual chemistry and tension between the two leads. The long distance eyeballing across the room when they don't really know what to say to each other, but or they don't even understand their feelings, but it's just this burning eye contact that's so beautiful. There's a shared and alternating fear and disdain between the leads. They never really feel the same way about each other.
Yeah,
but
right.
you watch it almost like a virus go back and forth between them until eventually they're on the same page. There's an injury of a supporting character. In Pride and Prejudice, you have Jane's chill or whatever that
she has like a cold.
Yeah, she has a cold.
But it's like an essential plot point. Like it's not just Jane got sick. And it brought her to Netherfield, and then Lizzie went there, and that's how she got to know Mr. Darcy, and yada yada yada. So. And
here you have Louise's trust fall. You also have in common a visit to an animal-strewn farm, good humor, and a loving. Very sweet representation of familial quirks. Very charitable interpretation of all little eccentricities of different family members.
But not shying away from how messy family dynamics are.
And underlying kind of quietly desperate money problems.
Yeah.
In both films.
Yeah, money is a huge component to both of those stories.
Right.
I mean, most of Jane Austen's stories, but especially those two.
Sure. Yeah. And then to play with 2020's Emma, which is the other kind of comparison to... I think that's the other shadow that this film lives in, because it's so modern and because it was so excellently modern.
I think Emma is one of the best. I mean, aside from 2005, Emma is one of the best Jane Austen adaptations out there. We did an episode on it. Y'all should listen to that.
Yeah, it was a fun episode, and it's such a great movie. It is so sharp. It's such a fantastically modernly shot and written, witty movie.
It's a delightful film. I love that movie
It's
so
just
much.
It's razor sharp and so funny in every scene, every character.
Yeah,
everyone's the MVP. It's one of those gorgeous ensembles.
Yeah.
There's the botched matchmaking, which you have in Persuasion as well as in Emma.
Yes.
You have a fussy father character played by a beloved older British actor.
Yes.
You have kind of an old friend dynamic with the love interest.
Yeah.
Where there's the tension of the story and of the central love story is how do they develop beyond that old friend dynamic?
And they've known each other for a long time. And
there's also, every time they're out shopping or going somewhere, there's a ribbon shop.
Always. There's always a ribbon shop. Also, I feel like Mrs. Russell is similar to Miss Taylor, the woman who played Theon's sister in Game of Thrones and Emma. Anyway, so there's that. I also just realized, this is just funny, the actress who plays Harriet in Emma is the main actress in X.
Look at that.
So look at that, drawing connections.
So the pivot that Persuasion brings to the table, how it furthers that subgenre of Jane Austen adaptations, is the fourth wall breaking. There are constant asides to the camera. And what this does, kind of on a structural level, of course it's fun to watch. It makes it kind of... It feels modern. It feels more indulgent. I always like fourth wall breaking.
I always think it's fun, especially if it's done well. And I think...
Oh, totally.
I was saying this while we were watching it and when we finished. This movie was carried by Dakota Johnson. It depended on the success of that actress in that role doing that. And I think she is so charming and did such a good job. I think if any other actress had done it, it would have been really cringy.
She might have the most charming screen presence in Hollywood.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people didn't like this movie, and a lot of it was because of that. A lot of people were bothered by it, but I thought she did a really good job.
Literally nowhere else in my notes do I talk about what I thought of anyone or anything in either of these movies. It's all about idea stuff.
This. Yeah,
but Dakota Johnson's performance is fantastic.
I'm just saying. There's been a lot of negative reviews about the movie.
The internet
online.
Was negative about something?
I know. Imagine that. But I think if you like Jane Austen and you're open to a not perfectly booked, historical accurate adaptation, go watch it because it's fun.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what is the effect of having those fourth wall breaking moments? I think it foregrounds subtext, especially when you're working from a novel. It means that Anne's internal life is very obvious to us. We have a new intimacy with the protagonist, and our connection with her, our ability to identify with her and understand her problems, to see her when she's at her most vulnerable, that is heightened so much more than you could get in a traditional film. So I think that's sort of the structural effect of that.
Yeah.
The other addition during these scenes is the rabbit.
I love the rabbit.
So yeah, she has a bunny in the movie. She has a pet bunny,
it's like
and she's always laying down with the bunny on her chest, and then she's kind of stroking the bunny while she's talking to us, doing these little fourth wall breaks.
It's like a cute Bond villain. It's very funny. Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just a signifier at first. Maybe that's just a little something to look at while we listen to her more or less give us exposition.
Yeah,
especially in the beginning of the film when she has to lay out who's who and what's what.
Yeah.
But as the film kept going, I think the rabbit is sort of the trick to the fourth wall breaking in this movie, because it keeps it from being any sort of direct Fleabag comparison. Because Anne does just kind of glance at us or smirk or wink at us sometimes.
She does a lot of Jim in the office looking at the camera.
Yeah, but Fleabag does that a lot too, where it's in the middle of a scene and she has this evil little smirk. She just looks at you.
Us. It's hilarious, yeah. I just rewatched Fleabag, and it is a phenomenal show.
But when you have a rabbit, when you have this kind of prop that you're playing with and stroking, it almost becomes Hamlet.
Yeah.
Because Anne only talks to us when she's in turmoil, or if there's action going on around her that she's sort of hiding from or recessed herself from, where she can't say what she really feels or means there.
Yeah.
So it starts to feel like an aside in Shakespeare, where someone's venting, or they're voicing a plan, or some hidden, true, dark feeling, and the rabbit becomes Yorick.
That's very fun. I like that.
It's a wonderful little signifier, and I think it really elevates the modern form of the fourth wall break.
Yeah.
I think they really did something with it here instead of using it as a nod to Fleabag. I thought it was really its own thing, and it gave me that Hamlet energy.
Yeah,
I've seen stage productions of various Shakespeare works where I always like to see how they do the fourth wall thing.
Yeah,
sometimes they cut the lights to the whole stage, and there's a spotlight on the one person who's talking. They always turn to the audience, and I think that's important. But
but you need to do more than that sometimes.
You either freeze the world or you have them move in slow-mo while the person giving the aside talks to us. And I loved the isolation of Anne on her own, almost plotting and scheming or reflecting or crying or something after the action. In the same way Hamlet is holding the skull in sort of this interlude before the climax of the play, where he's alone, and you don't need to use the spotlight because he's the only living person in the scene.
Right.
I thought it was a really wonderful utilization that I wasn't expecting.
And the bunny doesn't do anything; it just sits there.
Right.
Like, it's not like trying to get away. It's not playing or hopping. It's just sitting there. Yeah, interesting. That's very fun.
More to the thesis of what I was talking about, I called the similarities between these films meditations on love and time. Let's dive into that a little more. So these are two films about the power of love and its shelf life and the effect of waning or fading love.
Yeah.
So we're going to take them one at a time. X is a flash in the pan. I think the fact that this is a crew of a porn shoot has a very specific connotation in this conversation, where these are people at their physical and sexual peaks. They're in their prime, they're young, and what they're doing in film, because there's so much about the process of the camera and where it is and getting to know the film crew and the person holding the boom mic.
Yeah, and they're distinctly trying to make like an artistic film.
Right.
They're trying to make like an adult film, not like a trashy porno. Like, they're trying to make it like this more sophisticated, like, French cinema thing.
And they're trying to prove themselves.
Yeah, they're trying to make it big. Yeah.
They're immortalizing themselves, but they're also creating this record of them at their physical and sexual peaks, which is supposed to be the highlight of their lives when they have everything in front of them. Yeah. And this could open up all the doors for them. So it has this dragonfly and amber effect, where it is almost commercializing love or weaponizing love or lust or whatever, but it's slowing down time. So you're playing with those two ideas already just in the premise, with this lightning in a bottle effect of capturing beauty and youth somehow, bottling it. And all the while, when they're going to the gas station and getting food, or when they're talking amongst each other once they arrive at the Airbnb.
Well, you're calling it an Airbnb.
I mean, they're just renting a room. But they're insisting angrily about their bright futures. So it's the wide open road in front of them. That's what time is right now. It's the rest of their lives to squeeze everything they can out of life. It's not a scary thing, and which we'll get to in X.
And they're talking a lot about like seizing your opportunity while you're young and that sort of thing.
And the villain of this piece, very appropriately, is Pearl, Pearl is the old woman who is a bigger star in the second half of the film. She's stalking these characters. She's haunting them. She's watching them.
It was so funny. If you've been listening for a while, you'll know that Cam's kryptonite is scary old people. And we didn't know this movie was going to be about scary old people. He was very upset the whole time. It was great.
And Pearl is the embodiment of time. As much as she's sort of this caricature, and I don't mean that from the filmmaker's point of view, I mean from the character's point of view. She is a caricature of a bitter, insecure old woman.
Yeah.
Because she isn't just an old woman. She's an avatar of old age.
Yeah.
She is wildly exaggerated.
Yes.
You know when there are movies that cast a young person and put all sorts of plastic and makeup and shit on them to make them look old, and it looks alien and freaky and uncomfortable?
Yes.
This film is a young actress playing Pearl, but the makeup and the effects they do don't look bad at all.
No, it's really convincing.
They light it really well. It's very subtle but effective. It doesn't look unconvincing at all.
Yeah, the only reason I knew it was her was because I recognized her underneath all of it, but not because it looked fake. I just recognized the actress.
But Pearl is this avatar of old age. She's wildly exaggerated in her thoughts and movements and desires. But it's not just, oh, here's what I think old people are like. It's what these young characters, it's what their fear of old age is.
Yes.
It's their projection of the worst case scenario of being that age.
Yeah.
It's so tailored to their feelings. I mean, them in the gas station insisting that they have their whole lives in front of them and they're going to be rich and famous and everyone's going to know them.
Yeah.
And then, this Shakespearean character wanders in who is the exact opposite of that, who's haunting them. For the rest of the film. It's so tailored to them. So Pearl becomes a walking metaphor. She's what happens after the camera turns off. She's the thing that cannot be frozen in amber. Time marches on, and the promise of life and youth and all these things the characters are talking about is unfulfilled. And as the film goes from becoming, okay, these people are just shooting a porn in Texas, it starts to become a horror movie and a pseudo-slasher. That character of Pearl becomes the hatred and fear and vengeance of that desire.
Yeah.
Like, she is an abstraction of the feelings they're talking about. And their fear, their like desperate fear of that happening to them becomes Pearl's rage.
Right. Yeah.
It's an amazing twist. I have such a difficulty when I'm making art. It's a very different part of my brain than when I'm writing about art or with you talking about art. And anytime you try to bridge those two and talk about our art while making art, I think it's really dangerous. It's a lot harder because you can end up just sitting still having a conversation about stuff while not telling a story. It can become more critique than construction.
Yeah, it's an essay, not a story.
And again, like the magic trick effect of these films, it's just so natural, the evolution from what Pearl is to what Pearl's doing. It's a wonderful like activation of a character. I was really inspired watching this film because the main characters are so scared of age. They're so scared of time, to bring it back to our little thesis here, that they don't question their own very flawed love lives. These are all bad, broken, exploitative, unhealthy relationships.
Yeah.
But they're barely explored because they have this kind of common goal. So love is an abstraction. Love is an ideal that they're not old enough to reach for. It's just this concept. It's not really a reality of their lives.
Yeah.
Which is probably why they feel so comfortable commercializing it in this professional way.
Right.
And most, if not all of their actions are born out of a fear of time and this sort of white knuckle carpe diem.
Yes, totally.
And what is Pearl but that?
Yeah.
So Persuasion, on the other hand, we're looking at time and love. Persuasion kind of hits it in the other direction, where the main characters fear that they've already missed their chance.
Yeah.
They've already lost love. They're quite old for Jane Austen protagonists.
Yeah, Anne Elliot is 28, ripe old age of 28.
So there's this anxiety in all of the principal characters that they are past their prime. And we get to see these characters meet again after almost a decade.
Yeah.
They reconnect. They've attempted to move on with other people,
Yeah.
and we can see from the second they're on screen together, they're meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, like, the problem is that they didn't carpe diem,
Right.
and so now they're facing the consequences of that.
Right. And we can see before they can that these new matches are bad.
Yeah.
That they're meant to be only with each other, and everyone else is imperfect.
It's so funny. Cam was so upset the whole time. I've read the book, so I know what happens, but Cam has not, and so he was like furious at the other matches that were coming about. It was really funny.
And I'm glad we watched them in this order, because it should be frustrating. It should be frightening to see these characters who are so well made for each other,
Yes. Yeah.
to see them almost settle
I know.
for other people and other things, to settle for imperfect matches. They are old enough and world weary enough that they are considering those options.
Yeah,
we get to see
they have to, because it's all about, that's the whole thing. It's about practicality. The
Right.
reason that Anne turned Captain Wentworth down in the first place was because he didn't make enough money, and she was persuaded that that wasn't going to be good enough for her, and so she was trying to make a practical decision.
Right,
and that's the way it was
the
back
practical thing, the
Yeah.
different priorities and considerations. We see the increasing social pressure on them as they get older to just kind of settle and not be a problem and do the thing you're supposed to do. We see the decreasing opportunities and suitors that are approaching them. You know, their options are narrowing.
Yeah.
It's that thing that happens in the when people hit their late 20s
Yeah.
and they all get married and have babies.
Yep.
So they consider settling
Yeah.
instead of marrying for love. Maybe if I marry this person, it'll help my family, or maybe I'll just find someone nice and get this over with.
Is this your way of telling me that you settled?
No.
Okay.
But that consideration, factoring in all those other things and making all those compromises, privileging things above what you feel, what your heart wants, there's an undercurrent of failure there. Of did they miss out? Did they ruin their chance? And now they just get whatever's left.
Yeah, right.
It's that acceptance of failure. It's that kind of a sneaking suspicion that becomes more solid throughout the film
Yeah.
as they try to kind of settle down with different people. The film becomes a journey of them mellowing out, considering and reconsidering each other. And ultimately, when they decide to be together, they're making a thoughtful, informed decision about love with the benefit and perspective and experience of all the time they've had together and apart.
Yes.
So the time comes first and the love comes second.
Interesting. Nice.
Very different than how X handles these
Yes.
concepts. It's only when they're older and smarter and have lived and loved through more time that the characters in Persuasion can commit to each other.
I was going to say, it's almost like, you know, in X, they're afraid of the consequences that could come from doing it the wrong way or you know, missing out or whatever. And it's that fear that results in disaster. In Persuasion, they do face the consequences, and they learn from that and are still able to find happiness in the end.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the opposite.
So the crescendo of each film, despite coming from such different kind of opening positions on these two concepts, the crescendo of each film is a reclamation of love, despite the difficulties, pitfalls, and ravages of time that have gotten them there.
Yeah.
We just kind of walked through that with Persuasion.
Yeah.
But for X, it's when the narrative shifts to Pearl. And this is, I guess, a minor spoiler.
Yeah.
We see her reach out to her husband and try to have sex. And they're very old, and they haven't in a long time.
Yeah.
But you're seeing her yearning, which is
Yeah.
kind of renewed by seeing all these virile young people running
Yeah.
around their property.
Yeah,
You know,
and she had a whole conversation. I used to be young once. I used to be beautiful, and, you know, all these things. She's just longing for that.
And instead of killing them out of jealousy or resentment or whatever, she just tries to be like them. And her husband objects. And it's like the only moment of humanity we get from these people who become as crazy as the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Where eventually they decide together. It is sort of romantic. They're deciding together to take that risk, despite him that he's probably going to have a heart attack and die, which is his only objection.
Yes,
he also
says,
just
"I can't."
thinks he can't.
Yeah.
So they are making a similarly informed and world-weary decision about love and the state of their relationship after a lot of time knowing each other.
Interesting.
And there is an undercurrent of desperation and loss and fear and failure to that. where she's looking at all the pictures on the walls. She sees that all the best times are behind her,
Yeah.
and that there's not much left, and maybe their marriage wasn't what she wanted it to be. I mean, earlier in the film, she attempts to cheat on the husband with one of the young guys who's there.
Yeah.
So their decision to have sex, even if it might kill them, there's a tragedy to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
yeah.
a failure and a resignation and almost a suicidal angle to it.
Yeah, totally.
Because they know there are people running around trying to kill them for them killing some of the kids before,
Yeah.
but also that the husband might die.
Yeah.
So it's that same kind of world-weary, after a bunch of time, making this commitment to a relationship. I thought, it's a really bleak echo,
yeah.
but it's a fantastic parallel to what happens at the end of Persuasion.
That's really interesting.
The only other thing I have to talk about here is a shared maternal absence and resentment in these films.
Yes.
So with Persuasion, the sort of inciting incident of the film is that her mom's already dead, and there's this kind of aunt, kind of pseudo, you call someone your aunt, but they're not really, but they were like your mom's best friend or something.
Family friend.
Yeah, she's like a
Mrs. Russell.
non-controversial pseudo-maternal figure. Not a replacement, but just a comfortable aunt maternal figure.
Yeah.
And you think we're going to greet her warmly. And you learn that this person who's, trying to be good to Anne,
Yeah.
she's the one who gave her the titular ruinous advice. She
Yes.
persuaded her
Yeah.
against marrying Wentworth in the first place. So she's the one who started
So it's her fault.
the decade of misery, right?
Yeah.
The emotional carnage of that inciting incident, which kind of cost Anne 8 years of her life and happiness with Wentworth.
In her whole 20s and all of her youthful years where she's, a great candidate for marriage.
And as much as she and this aunt have still a warm relationship with advice and kindness and shared history, there are moments throughout the film where it flares up and there's discussion of Wentworth or there's discussion of that piece of advice. And I loved that the aunt almost looked scared of Anne every time it came up. It was this reversal of parental disapproval, not only because she wasn't her mother, but that it was the child disapproving.
Yeah, you could tell she felt really bad about that and like she had messed up.
It was a really interesting pivot.
And she doesn't back down from her position. Like she insists that it was the right advice and that Anne will get over it, but you can tell she still feels really bad about it.
And on the other hand, you have X, where there are no parents anywhere in this movie. Even Pearl and the hubby, they seem to be childless.
Yeah.
They don't mention kids. I don't think we see any pictures of kids in the house. So
they either don't have them, or if they do, they're not in the picture. Yeah.
And when the movie is basically a bunch of young people and these two incredibly old people, it reframes the entire porn crew, the entire younger generation and cast as the children.
Yeah.
And them as these pseudo-parents.
Yeah.
It makes them the sexual revolution of the 60s. It makes them the cultural backlash, the religious kind of fervor and backlash to that.
Yes.
This sort of moral panic.
Yeah.
Embodied in two people.
Yeah, like you can see them like judging the kids for how they dress and when they figure out what it is they're doing, there's a lot of judgment there. And yeah.
So this is, I have to spoil the ending, but this is also the end of the episode. So whatever.
Yeah.
You've made your decision. So the final reveal of X reframes this vignette, this framing device throughout the film of every TV that's on is showing this sermon. We learn that is our main character Maxine's dad.
Yes.
That he's the pastor railing against all this stuff on TV and that his daughter ran away. And now we know she's making a porn in an Airbnb.
Yes.
So it reframes this general cultural disdain into a specific disapproving, watchful eye in a parental sense. And we don't see the mother. We see the crowd that he's talking to, but there's no specific pointing to her mother.
No,
so
right.
there's this absence again
Yes.
of a natural mother figure, which means that maternal energy is, you have to look for it elsewhere in the film. And the answer the film gives you is the doubling.
Yes.
There's a bit of double casting in this film, which I tried not to spoil earlier, just in case you hadn't made up your mind.
Yeah,
Where
I didn't quite spoil it either.
I know, good job. So Mia Goth, who's playing Maxine, who's our main character.
Who also played Harriet and Emma.
Yes.
Yes.
She plays Pearl under all that makeup and wonderful lighting. A little double casting. Again, very Shakespearean, like the Yorick connection in Persuasion. The double casting there is the similarities. It's the commentary. I've seen Shakespeare performances where they have 5 actors. So they're holding a hat or a scarf or
a
something,
single prop,
and they just hold it up to them when they're acting those lines, and then they take it down and respond to themselves.
Yes, and like when it's done well, it's really cool. I love
think
seeing
it's
productions
incredible.
like that. Yeah,
But I think the most important artistic choice you can make in that type of production is how you're doubling up the roles. Because it can't just be, well, this person, we can't have them talk to themselves in a scene, so you be him and he'll be her. And
right.
It can't be that. It has to be poetic. There has to be a connection, an echo, a synergy between these roles where maybe everyone of a family is this character. Or you can do it in a way that heightens the commentary of the work of art.
Yes.
And to disperse this absent maternal character into Pearl and Maxine, where Pearl is the only character in the film who is openly judgmental and disapproving of Maxine in this gambit to become the big Texas porn star.
Yeah.
She's the one who openly, she screams at her and calls her a whore at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That's the only direct cultural backlash, that's a kind of a moral panic backlash to the sexual revolution. That's the only time that is contained within a character confrontation in the film.
Yeah.
So Pearl is this nightmare scenario of a mother for Maxine. And we know it's the actress talking to herself. So there's a physical similarity between them. So she almost looks like an older version of her mother.
Yes.
And we don't see her mother, but we see her father railing on the TV.
Yeah.
So that absence is contained in that physical resemblance and the doubling, because the televangelist dad is talking about Maxine escaping.
Yes.
And at the end of the film, she escapes again.
Yeah.
So she's escaped from the televangelist dad, and then at the end of the film, she escapes from Pearl, who is this pseudo-maternal figure. And now she gets a fresh start.
Yeah.
After escaping now both of her parents and this kind of chain that she hadn't been able to throw off yet. And I think there's a wonderful kind of graduation from this unresolved maternal conflict that simmers along in both of these movies, but is kind of key to the ending of both of them.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, you can argue that the reason that the main conflicts, the main problems of each story happen is because of the parental or lack of parental figures. Like in Persuasion, it's twofold. It's one, her mother is gone, so instead it's Mrs. Russell who gives her this bad advice, but it's also her father who is very obsessed with money.
Right.
And kind of instills, like, not that Anne is ever shallow about money, but she's very conscious of money and its necessity and its danger and all of those things.
Sure.
And so that's part of it. And also he seems like he's not a very good dad, so she kind of doesn't have a lot of guidance.
She's very self-sufficient.
Yes, right. And then in X, it seems that what's Mia Goth's character's name?
Maxine.
Thank you. Maxine's father was this extreme, religious extremist guy, which probably pushed, people who have extreme parents tend to rebel and in the opposite extreme way. And so that's what's happening with her. And so she has this mantra for herself. I will not accept a life. What is it? I will not accept a life I don't deserve or something. Yeah, it's that. And so she's so adamantly trying to get away from what she came from. So that it's the inciting incident is because of the parents.
And she's doing the most rebellious, most disapproved thing.
Yes.
So this is a reaction to that fundamentalism that she ran away from.
Yes, right. And not that neither of these main characters have their own agency and make their own mistakes, because they do. But maternal disapproval or disdain or disappointment is at the root of both inciting incidents for these films. Yeah. Despite not seeing the characters on screen. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, what a fun way to talk about both of these films together.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah, no, I really liked what you brought. I enjoyed both of these. And when you first brought it up, I was like, I don't see that at all. And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, okay, yeah, I can see where some of the crossovers
You're saying
happening.
in 1 second you did all the work that I did.
Absolutely, yes, I did.
I didn't think there was anything there. I spent 1 or 2 seconds on it.
I just meant I thought about it for a second. I was like, there's something there. And then I'm saying I appreciated that you really went into it and we got to really dig into it.
And you gave a wonderful sidecar performance.
You're
I thought you enhanced
welcome. I was buckled in to the nines. I really enjoyed both of these movies.
Yeah.
I thought X was fantastic.
Yes.
I really liked X.
Me too.
I didn't have much to say on it, not because I didn't like it, but just because all I had to say was this was excellent. And lots of fun and really freaky and lots of fun, like homage to other horror films and just grand old time.
Yeah.
And then Persuasion, it wasn't my favorite Austen adaptation. It wasn't my favorite movie. It was, it simplified a lot of the complexities of Persuasion, but also I don't remember the book all that well because I read it like 6 years ago.
I really enjoyed it.
In like May of my like senior year of college when I was checked the fuck out. So I don't remember. But it, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Dakota Johnson was great. Wentworth was great.
Yes. The casting choices were really fun. It has a lot of modern phrases, but I enjoyed that. Sure. I think Jane Austen works wonderfully in a modern context, so I didn't mind it. It wasn't nearly as cringy as what Bridgerton does to Regency England. Like I cannot stand Bridgerton, and this was good. So this was not Bridgerton. So if you were like,
no, this is great.
If you're like me and you couldn't stand Bridgerton and you were offended by it,
and things
things
don't have to change your life for you to like them.
Exactly. Like I was not expecting it to be like, I'll never expect a Jane Austen adaptation to be Pride and Prejudice 2005.
Right.
But I wasn't even expecting this to be Emma. I was just like, this will be fun.
Sure.
I think I'm going to enjoy it. And it was fun. Yeah. I kind of wish I hadn't seen the trailer because the trailer kind of tells you the whole movie.
It does.
Don't watch the trailer. Like, what the fuck? I thought we were done with those kinds of trailers. Like, I thought we stopped doing that 20 years ago. So that was annoying. But it was good.
X and Persuasion.
Yeah.
Meditations on Time and Love.
Now, how are we going to title this? X Persuasion? Get it? Because like comps. Again,
I understand.
You get it? Okay. That was a really good joke in my head, and then I said it out loud, and now I want to die. So.
On that note, all right. See you Friday. Bye. Bye.